Hello guys, this is part 54 of SQL Server. Before continuing with this session, I strongly recommend you to watch part 11 and 48 of this video series, where we have discussed about group by and derived tables. So what this pivot operator? Pivot is a SQL Server operator that can be used to turn unique values from one column into multiple columns in the output, thereby effectively rotating a table. Let's understand what we mean by this definition with an example. I have this table. I have this table TBL product sales, which has got three columns: sales agent, sales country, and sales amount. If we look at the data, we have three sales agent: John, Tom, and David, selling in three different countries: UK, US, and India. We also have sales amount in the same table. We have also sales amount in the same table. Now let's say we want to write a query which produces the total sales amount by sales country and by sales amount by sales agent. We want to write a query which produces the total sales amount by sales country and by sales agent. So obviously, if we have to achieve this, we can make use of group by. We have spoken about group by in a great detail in part 11 of this video series. So if you new to group by, I strongly suggest to watch that video first. So in the output, we want sales country, sales agent, and total sales amount. So in the select clause, sales country, sales agent, sum of sales amount as total. So we get all the three columns from TBL product sales table, group first by sales country and then by sales agent. Order by in the same way, in the same order: sales country first and then sales agent. So this query would produce this output. So this query would produce this output for us. Now I would say this data can be better presented in a cross tab format. Now let's understand what we mean by cross tab format. So this is the same data. So this is the same data. Which our group by query has produced. Now, if you look at this, David has made a 960 in India. David has made a total sales of 960 in India. And if you look at the way the same data is presented here. The same data is presented here. David in India made a total sales of 960. This is in the cross tab format. So David made total sales of 960 in India. Along the same line, Tom made a total sales of 1340 in UK. So Tom UK 1340. So it is the same data. So Tom UK 1340. So it is the same data, except that we are presenting this in a cross tab format. And to achieve this, we are making use of pivot operator. So let's see what is happening here. Now, if you look at this India, US. Now if you look at this India, US and UK, these are actually column values. For sales country column. But then we are converting these column values into column name in the output. And if you look at the definition of pivot operator, pivot is a SQL Server operator that can be used to turn unique values from one column into multiple columns in the output. One column, sales country column, in the multiple columns in the output. So if you look at this So if you look at this, this we are taking the unique values of this. We are taking the unique value of this sales country column, India, US, UK, and turning them into columns names and turning them into column names in the output, and that is what pivot operator does, and which give us the effect of rotating a table. Okay, so let's now see how actually write this pivot operator. How actually write this pivot operator? Query. Pivot operator query. So if you look at this, in the output we want sales agent, and in the output we want sales agent, India, US, and UK columns. So select sales agent, India, US, UK from TBL product sales. So this is our so this is our TBL product sales table. In the TBL product sales table, we only have got sales agent, column. We don't have India, US, and UK. So where are these columns coming from? These columns are the pivoted column. These columns are the pivoted columns produced by the pivot operator. So if you look at this pivot operator that we have, what this pivot operator is doing, it is basically performing a sum aggregate function on the sales amount column, because we want a total sales amount, and then in the output we want this India, US, UK to be pivoted. So for and these columns and these columns and this column India, US, UK, they are the columns value. They are the column values of sales country columns. So for sales country column, for sales country columns, in India, US, UK, in India, US, UK. So these are the values. So these are the values that we want to treat as columns. So now this pivot operator. So now this pivot operator produces them as column which are then selected by this outer select query, and we are giving this pivot, and we are giving this pivot, whatever this pivot operator produces, an alias pivot table. So it is as simple as that. Select non-pivoted columns from table or it can be a table expression as well. We will talk about table expression in the next slide, and then the pivoted columns from the pivoted table, and then the pivoted columns from the pivoted table. And within the pivot operator, we specifying aggregate function and the columns on which we are performing aggregate function, and for the values which in turn will be converted into pivoted columns for the outer select query. So it is as simple as that. Let's look at this in action. Let's look at this in action. So this is our product sales table, which has got sales agent, sales country, and sales amount. And this is our group by, and this is our group by query, performing a group by on sales country and sales agent. So if we execute that, we should get total sales. We should get total sales by sales country and sales agent. Next, if we want to present that in a cross tab format, we can make use of pivot operator, which will convert the unique values in the sales country into column names. India, UK, US. By making use of this pivot operator. So if you look at the pivot operator, we are performing this aggregate We are performing this aggregate function on this sales amount column for sales country column. For these values, India, US, UK, which in turn will be converted into pivoted column, So let's execute this. So let's execute this query, and we should get the output. That we expect. Okay, now let's look at slight variation of this. Okay. Now I have a table here which is called TBL product sales. TBL products sales. So if you look at this table, it is pretty much similar to the table that we have seen just now. Sales country, sales agent, sales country, sales agent, sales amount. In addition to these three columns, we have the ID column. As well. Okay, and look at the pivot query. Again, this pivot query is the same query. If you look at this query, now obviously the pivot operator this pivot operator is giving the sum of sales amount for sales country in India, US, UK. These values will be converted into pivoted column. These value will be converted into pivoted columns. So India, US, UK from this pivot table. Whereas sales agent from TBL product sales. Now apart from sales agent and sales country, sales country and sales amount, we also have the ID column. Now apart from sales agent, sales country and sales amount, we also have the ID column. Because of the presence of this this ID column and this original table. Okay, look at this. What is going to happen when I execute this query? Let's execute this. Let's see what happens when I execute this query. We did not expect this output. We did not expect this output. Now I got 20 rows back. Now I got 20 rows back. Okay, John, Tom, David, India, US, UK. Now these users are basically repeated. These users are basically repeated. And if you look at the number of rows that we have in TBL product sales table, we have 20 rows there. We have 20 rows there. But my pivot query is also giving, but my pivot query is also giving me 20 rows, and this output is now, and this output is not what I have expected, and that is because of the presence of the ID column. ID column in TBL product sales table, and you are directly retrieving from TBL product sales, so it is also talking, so it is also taking the ID column into considerations, and we have this output, that we have not anticipated. So obviously, to correct this, it is pretty simple. All you do is use a derived table. And then select only the columns that you need. So what we are doing here, first look at this select only sales agent, sales country, and sales amount. From TBL product sales. So obviously, if I execute this, query, I get all the rows. Without the ID columns. So it is as if we have only 3 columns. It is like the same table that we have before, and then you are giving this a name, and then you are giving this a name, and you are giving this a name. This is nothing but a drive table. This is nothing but a derived table as well. So you are giving that derived table, source table, as the name for the derived table. And then the rest of the query is pretty much similar. Much similar to what we have already seen. So we have pivot. sum of sales amount for sales country, for sales country, for for these for these column values India, US, UK, and you are giving it an alias pivot table, and you are selecting sales agent, and you are selecting sales agent not directly from TBL product sales table, but from the source table, a derived table. And then India, USA, US, and UK, these are coming from the pivot table. These are coming from the pivot table because those are the pivoted columns. Because those are the pivoted columns. This is the non-pivoted. This is the non-pivoted column. This is the non-pivoted column which is coming from source table. Which is coming from source table. So now when we execute this query, we get the output that we expect. So now when we execute this query, we get the output that we expect, the same as before. So if you have other columns, in the table apart from just the columns that we are operating on, look at this. If you look at the this pivot query, look at this, this pivot query or this pivot query, there are two pivot query. If you look at this first pivot query, or this pivot query, we are only talking about sales agent, sales country, and sales amount columns. But we also have additional column. Here ID. And if you don't want those columns to be involved in the output, then make use of the derived table. which exclude those columns, and then in that derived table, and then in that derived table we only select the columns, we only select the column that we want to include in the pivot, and we get the output that we expect. Otherwise you end up otherwise you end up output like this, which you see here, which is not quite what we wanted. All right, so if you look at the pivot query here, it seems a little confusing. But actually not. It is pretty simple. If you understand the syntax of the pivot, so from MNSD, so from MSN, from MSDN, this is syntax. This is the syntax of the pivot operator. So if you look at this select, select non-pivoted column, you can give it an alias if you want. We have not given the alias. So first pivoted column, second pivoted column, and how many ever pivoted columns you have from your select query. You have from your select query. So if you look at this so you have from your select query that produces the data, the derived table. Because keep in mind, in the actual source table, if you have more columns than what you want in your output, then the output may not be what you expect. So in those circumstances, make use of this table expression. Make use of this table expression or derived table. So select the query that produces the data, and then So that acts as the source. That acts as the source for your select query, from where you will get non-pivoted, from where you will get non-pivoted non-pivoted column. But for pivoted column, but for pivoted column, you actually get them from the pivoted operator. Okay, so pivot operator will have an aggregate function. So pivot operator will have an aggregate function, and that aggregate function obviously performs aggregation on some columns, on some column. In our example it was doing it on sales amount column. For column that contains for columns that contain the value that will become the column headers. In our case, sales country column. In our case, sales country column in first pivoted column, comma, second pivoted columns. You can relate this syntax. You can relate this syntax directly with this query that we have. And another thing to keep in mind, you can also have optional order by. You can also have optional order by clause. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have